Humans leaped from dropships into the burning city as plasma bolts sizzled past. No one else dared fight the Andromeda Empire to save the Kryllians from extinction, but humans never ran from a bully. Praxis sprinted through debris-choked streets. Charred Kryllian bodies littered the ruins. Praxis choked on smoke, desperate to reach the last shuttles off this hell. Cruel laughter made Praxis spin. Andromeda troopers had civilians on their knees. The lead trooper drew his sidearm. Praxis roared and charged. A rifle butt smashed his face. He crumpled, spitting blood and teeth. Pathetic, the Andromeda commander sneered. He aimed his gun at Praxis' head. Your species ends here. Explosions suddenly rocked the street. Smoke billowed. Plasma shrieked and popped. Humans poured from the haze, guns blazing. Captain Marcus Riker gripped the arms of his command chair as the UES Valiant shuddered from another barrage of plasma fire. Alarms blared across the bridge, red lights flashing. Report, he barked. Lieutenant Chen, his tactical officer, called out from her console. Shields are holding at 70%, sir. Minor damage to the outer hull. Riker nodded. The Valiant was a tough ship designed to take a beating, but even she had her limits. Sir, we're receiving a distress call from the surface, Ensign Park said. It's the Kryllian government. They're requesting immediate assistance against the Andromeda invasion. Riker's jaw clenched. The Kryllians were on the brink of extinction, and the galactic community had turned its back on them. The Andromedas were too powerful, their victory assured. No one wanted to risk incurring their wrath. But Riker had never been one to back down from a fight, especially when innocent lives were at stake. He turned to his first officer, Commander Valdez. Prep a team of Marines for deployment. We're going in. Valdez raised an eyebrow. Sir, with all due respect, the Andromedas will tear us apart if we enter the atmosphere. Then we'll just have to make sure that doesn't happen, Riker said. He looked to Chen. Lieutenant, I want all weapons primed and ready. As soon as we break through the clouds, target those Andromeda fighters and take them out. Chen nodded. Aisha. Riker hit the comm button on his chair. Attention all hands. This is the captain. We're about to enter Kryllia's atmosphere to assist with evacuation efforts. I want everyone at their stations and ready for combat. This is going to be a rough ride, but I know you'll all do your duty. Riker out. He cut the comm and turned to his helmsman. Ensign Nakamura, take us in. The Valiant dove towards the planet, hull glowing red as it hit the upper atmosphere. Andromeda fighters swarmed like angry hornets, peppering the ship with plasma fire. But the Valiant's crew was ready for them. Railguns and point defense lasers opened up, swatting the enemy craft from the sky. Missiles streaked from the Valiant's launch tubes, detonating in brilliant flashes of light. The bridge shook as the ship plowed through the debris field of destroyed fighters. Riker held onto his chair, watching the altimeter tick down. Prepare for landing, he said, and get those Marines to the spaceport. We don't have much time. The Valiant leveled out, thrusters firing as it approached the ravaged cityscape. Smoke billowed from countless fires, obscuring the once gleaming towers. But there in the distance was the spaceport, and the last hope for the Kryllian people. Riker just prayed they weren't too late. Praxis blinked through the smoke and dust, his eyes watering. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. Human Marines poured into the spaceport, their weapons spitting fire at the Andromeda soldiers. The invaders fell like puppets with their strings cut, no match for the humans' superior training and technology. A hand gripped Praxis' arm, pulling him to his feet. He found himself face to face with a human Marine, his armor scorched and dented, but his eyes fierce and determined. I'm Lieutenant Jake Hawkins, the human said. We're here to get you out of here. Stick close, and we'll keep you safe. Praxis nodded, too stunned to speak. He followed Hawkins and the other Marines as they herded the Kryllian survivors towards the waiting dropships. The humans formed a perimeter around the civilians, their weapons sweeping back and forth, daring any Andromedas to try their luck. But the invaders weren't done yet. As the group neared the dropships, a hail of plasma fire erupted from a nearby building. Andromeda assault troopers, heavily armed and armored, poured from the structure, their weapons blazing. Hawkins cursed and shoved Praxis behind a chunk of rubble. "Stay down," he yelled, then turned to his Marines. "Suppressing fire, don't let them get close." The humans opened up with their rifles, the air filling with the staccato bark of gunfire. The Andromedas took cover, but the Marines were relentless, advancing steadily and forcing the invaders back. Praxis watched in awe as Hawkins and his team engaged the Andromedas in close-quarters combat. The humans were like ghosts, their movements fluid and precise. They ducked and weaved, their blades flashing as they cut down the enemy soldiers with ruthless efficiency. Inspired by their bravery, Praxis spotted a fallen Andromeda rifle nearby. He crawled over to it and snatched it up, checking the charge. It was nearly full. A glint of light caught his eye. An Andromeda sniper, perched on a rooftop, had Hawkins in his sights. The lieutenant was too focused on the enemies in front of him to notice. Praxis didn't hesitate. He brought the rifle to his shoulder, sighted down the barrel, and squeezed the trigger. The weapon kicked against his shoulder, but he held it steady. The sniper's head snapped back, and he tumbled from the roof. Hawkins whirled around, his eyes wide. He saw Praxis with the rifle and gave him a nod of thanks. With the Andromedas defeated, the Marines quickly loaded the Krelian survivors onto the dropships. Praxis found himself strapped into a seat next to Hawkins as the craft lifted off, the ruins of the spaceport falling away beneath them. "Thank you," Praxis said, his voice hoarse, "for coming for us. We thought no one cared." Hawkins gave him a tired smile. "We're not the kind of people who stand by and watch others suffer. If there's a chance we can help, we'll take it." The dropship shuddered as it passed through the atmosphere, the orange glow of re-entry visible through the viewports. Praxis leaned back in his seat, exhaustion finally catching up with him. But for the first time in a long time, he felt something he hadn't in years: hope. The humans had come for them, had risked their lives to save a species on the brink of annihilation. Maybe, just maybe, they had a chance after all. The dropship shuddered as it touched down in the hangar bay of the UES Valiant. Praxis stumbled down the ramp, his legs unsteady after the adrenaline-fueled battle on Krelia's surface. Around him, the other Krelian survivors looked equally dazed, their eyes haunted by the horrors they had witnessed. But the humans were there to help. Medics swarmed the hangar, triaging the wounded and administering first aid. Others passed out blankets and water, their faces etched with concern and compassion. Praxis gratefully accepted a bottle of water from a young human corpsman. He drank deeply, the cool liquid soothing his parched throat. A medic approached him, scanner in hand, and began checking him for injuries. "You're lucky," the medic said, his voice kind. "Just some cuts and bruises. Nothing serious." Praxis nodded, too exhausted to speak. He let the medic clean and bandage his wounds, his mind still reeling from the events of the past few hours. A commotion near the hangar entrance caught his attention. Captain Riker strode into the bay, his face grim. He was followed by a group of Krelian leaders, their robes tattered and stained with soot. Riker approached the group, his hand outstretched. "I'm Captain Marcus Riker of the UES Valiant. On behalf of the United Earth Federation, I want to express our deepest sympathies for what your people have endured." The lead Krelian, an elderly male with a long white beard, clasped Riker's hand. "Captain Riker, we cannot thank you enough for your intervention. Without your help, our species would have been wiped out." Riker's jaw clenched. The Andromedas have gone too far. Systematically exterminating entire populations is a crime against sentience itself. The Krelian leader nodded. "They see us as a threat to their empire. They will not stop until every last one of us is dead." "We won't let that happen," Riker said, his voice firm. "I'm contacting Earth now to request reinforcements and supplies. We'll help you take back your worlds and put an end to the Andromeda's reign of terror." The Krelians murmured their thanks, their faces filled with a mix of gratitude and relief. Riker excused himself and headed for the bridge, his stride purposeful. Praxis watched him go, a newfound respect blooming in his chest. The humans were different from any species he had encountered before. They were brave, compassionate, and willing to fight for what was right. He spotted Lieutenant Hawkins across the hangar, helping an injured Krillian onto a stretcher. Praxis made his way over to the Marine, his heart pounding. "Lieutenant Hawkins," he said, his voice trembling slightly, "I wanted to thank you for saving my life down there and for saving my people." Hawkins turned to him, his face breaking into a smile. "You're welcome, Praxis, but you saved my life too. Remember, that was some pretty impressive shooting back there." Praxis felt a flush of pride at the praise. He took a deep breath, gathering his courage. "I want to join you. I want to fight alongside the human Marines and take back our worlds from the Andromedas." Hawkins raised an eyebrow. "Are you sure it won't be easy? Our training is intense, and the battles will be even harder." Praxis nodded, his gaze unwavering. "I'm sure I can't just sit back and watch while my people suffer. I want to make a difference." Hawkins clapped him on the shoulder. "Then welcome aboard, Praxis. We'll start your training as soon as we get the go-ahead from Captain Riker. And trust me, you won't be the only Krillian joining up. I have a feeling we're going to have a lot of new recruits before this is over." Praxis felt a surge of excitement at the prospect. He knew the road ahead would be long and difficult, but with the humans by their side, the Krillians finally had a chance to take back their destiny, and he would be there every step of the way, fighting for the future of his species and the galaxy as a whole. Praxis gripped his rifle as the dropship shuddered, the human vessel descending through the atmosphere of yet another Andromeda-occupied Krillian world. In the weeks since his rescue from Kralia, Praxis had thrown himself into training with the human Marines, learning their tactics, their weapons, and their indomitable fighting spirit. Now he was putting those skills to use. The Valiant and its fleet had launched a series of lightning strikes against Andromeda-held planets, catching the occupiers off guard and liberating Krellian populations before the enemy could mount an effective defense. Praxis and his fellow Krillian volunteers had proven invaluable in these operations. They knew the terrain, the cities, and the Andromeda's favored tactics. They could anticipate the enemy's moves and guide the humans to victory. The dropship touched down with a jolt, and the ramp lowered. Lieutenant Hawkins was the first out, his rifle at the ready. "Let's move, people," he barked. "We've got civilians to evacuate and Andromedas to take down." Praxis charged down the ramp, his heart pounding with a mix of fear and exhilaration. He had seen so much death and destruction at the hands of the Andromedas. Now he had the chance to fight back, to make them pay for every life they had taken. The Marines and Krillian volunteers fanned out through the war-torn city, engaging Andromeda patrols and clearing buildings of enemy soldiers. Praxis moved with them, his rifles spitting plasma bolts at any Andromeda foolish enough to show their face. Overhead, the sky was filled with the flashes of ship-to-ship combat as the human fleet clashed with the Andromeda Armada. The ground shook with the impact of orbital bombardments, and the air was thick with smoke and the stench of burning metal. But the humans pressed on, their superior technology and training giving them the edge. The Andromedas fell back, their lines crumbling under the relentless assault. In orbit, Captain Riker stood on the bridge of the Valiant, his eyes fixed on the tactical display. The Andromeda fleet was formidable, their ships heavily armed and armored, but Riker had a few tricks up his sleeve. "Concentrate fire on their flagship," he ordered, his voice calm and measured. "Take out their command and control, and the rest will follow." The Valiant weapons officer nodded, his fingers flying over his console. The ship's main cannon swiveled, locking onto the Andromeda flagship. A moment later, a beam of pure energy lanced out, piercing the enemy vessel's shields and slicing through its hull like a hot knife through butter. The flagship exploded in a brilliant flash of light, and the Andromeda fleet fell into disarray. Some ships tried to flee, while others fought on. But it was a losing battle. The human fleet pressed their advantage, picking off the enemy one by one until the last Andromeda ship was nothing more than a field of glowing debris. On the surface, Praxis and the Marines had fought their way to the Andromeda command center. It was a formidable structure, heavily defended by the enemy's most elite troops, but they had no choice. If they could take out the Andromeda leadership, the planet would be liberated. Hawkins led the charge, his rifle blazing as he cut down Andromeda soldiers left and right. Praxis was right behind him, his own weapons spitting death at the enemy. They burst into the command center, plasma bolts flying all around them. There, at the center of the room, stood Zaroth, the Andromeda commander who had ordered the extermination of Praxis people. Praxis felt a surge of rage and hatred at the sight of him. This was the monster who had taken everything from him, who had slaughtered his family and friends without mercy. With a roar of fury, Praxis charged at Zaroth, his rifle forgotten. The Andromeda commander met him head-on, his own blade flashing in the dim light. They clashed in a flurry of strikes and parries, their weapons sparking as they collided. Praxis was dimly aware of the battle raging around them, of Hawkins and the Marines fighting off the last of the Andromeda guards, but his focus was entirely on Zaroth. This was his chance for vengeance, to make the Andromeda pay for all the lives he had taken. Their blades locked, and they strained against each other face to face. Zaroth's eyes were cold and merciless, devoid of any hint of remorse or compassion. "Who you fight well for a primitive for?" The Andromeda sneered. "But you are no match for me." Praxis bared his teeth in a snarl of defiance. "We'll see about that," he growled. With a burst of strength, he shoved Zaroth back and lunged forward, his blade aimed at the Andromeda's heart. Zaroth tried to parry, but he was too slow. Praxis' sword pierced his chest, and the Andromeda commander let out a gasp of pain and shock. Praxis yanked his blade free, and Zaroth crumpled to the ground, his eyes wide and staring. Around them, the last of the Andromeda guards were falling, cut down by the relentless fire of the human Marines. It was over. The planet was liberated, and the Andromeda threat was no more. Praxis stood over Zaroth's body, his chest heaving with exertion and emotion. He had avenged his fallen comrades, had broken the Andromeda hold on his people. But the cost had been high. So many lives had been lost, so much suffering endured. The Krillians would never forget the sacrifices that had been made, the bravery of the humans who had come to their aid. Hawkins clapped Praxis on the shoulder, his face streaked with sweat and grime. "You did it, Praxis," he said, his voice filled with pride. "You saved your people." Praxis nodded, too exhausted to speak. He looked around at the ruins of the command center, at the bodies of the Andromeda soldiers scattered across the floor. This was just the beginning, he knew. The Krillians had a long road ahead of them, a difficult process of rebuilding and healing, but they would not be alone. The humans would be there every step of the way, offering their support and friendship. And Praxis would be there too, a hero among his people and a respected ally of the humans. He would never forget the lessons he had learned, the bravery and compassion of the species that had saved his own from extinction. He looked to the stars, visible through the shattered roof of the command center. The galaxy had been changed forever by the actions of the humans, by their unwavering commitment to justice and freedom. And Praxis knew that he would spend the rest of his life fighting to uphold those ideals, to ensure that no other species would ever have to suffer as his own had suffered. It was a daunting task, but he was ready for it. With the humans by his side, anything was possible. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel. And for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.